16-year-old Zara Washington freezes as the Air Marshal towers over her, demanding she exit the aircraft immediately. Surrounding passengers film the confrontation while flight attendants block the aisle. Zara's phone rings, her father's calling. "Dad, they're trying to remove me from the plane." Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up against injustice. The events that led to this terrifying moment will leave you speechless. The day had started with such promise. Zara Washington stood in front of her bedroom mirror, carefully selecting which earrings would complete her outfit for the flight. At 16, this would be her first time flying alone, and everything needed to be perfect. Her suitcase was meticulously packed with everything she'd need for the prestigious summer STEM program at Columbia University. For a young black girl passionate about quantum computing, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. "Zara, honey. Your breakfast is getting cold," her father called from downstairs. Malcolm Washington, CEO of Washington Technologies, one of the nation's fastest-growing Fortune 500 tech companies, was already dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Under normal circumstances, he would have accompanied his daughter to New York, but an emergency board meeting had forced him to stay behind in Atlanta. "Coming, Dad." Zara called back, giving herself one last look in the mirror. She straightened her shoulders, remembering her mother's words, "Stand tall, baby girl. The world may try to shrink you, but you've got galaxies inside you." It had been 3 years since cancer had taken Michaela Washington, leaving Malcolm and Zara to forge ahead as a team of two. Their bond had only strengthened through the grief, making this separation particularly significant. Their breakfast nook overlooked the manicured gardens of their Buckhead estate, one of Atlanta's most exclusive neighborhoods. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as Malcolm reviewed Zara's itinerary for the third time. "You've got your boarding pass downloaded?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "Yes, Dad," Zara rolled her eyes affectionately. "And you'll text me when you land?" "And call," she promised. "Dad, I'll be fine. I've been on planes since I was a baby." Malcolm set down his cup, his expression turning serious. "Zara, you know this is different. It's your first time traveling alone, and I'm a young black woman navigating spaces that weren't designed for me," she finished, having heard this speech many times before. "I know, Dad." Malcolm nodded, the weight of generational knowledge heavy on his shoulders. Despite his success, his wealth, his Harvard MBA, and his company's billion-dollar valuation, he knew that in certain situations, none of that mattered. His skin color still made him suspect in department stores. Security guards still followed him in high-end boutiques. Flight attendants still questioned his first-class tickets. "I'm not trying to scare you, baby girl. I just want you prepared." "I know, Dad. Mom taught me well, and so have you." Malcolm reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. "I got you something for the trip." Zara raised an eyebrow. "I already have a phone. This one's special. It records audio automatically when you unlock it with this pattern." He demonstrated a specific swipe pattern. "Just in case." "In case what?" But they both knew the answer. "In case the world forgets that you deserve to take up space," Malcolm said quietly. Their driver, Tyrone, loaded Zara's luggage into the back of the black Escalade as Malcolm went through his mental checklist one more time. "Columbia Housing has my contact information. And Professor Chen knows you're arriving today. And Dad," Zara laughed, "everything's arranged. You made sure of it." The ride to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was filled with Malcolm pointing out landmarks from Zara's childhood and offering last-minute advice about New York City. Anyone observing would see a nervous father sending his daughter off to a summer program, but underneath was the unspoken anxiety of a black parent whose child would be temporarily beyond his protection. As they pulled up to the departures terminal, Malcolm squeezed Zara's hand. "Remember who you are, Zara Washington. You come from a long line of survivors and innovators. Don't let anyone make you small. I won't, she promised, her voice steady though her stomach fluttered with nerves. Call me the second you land. I don't care if I'm in the board meeting. I will. They hugged tightly, and then Zara was walking through the sliding doors of the terminal, pulling her carry-on behind her, her father's eyes following her until she disappeared from view. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport buzzed with the chaotic energy of thousands of travelers rushing to destinations across the globe. Zara joined the security line, boarding pass and ID ready in hand. She'd flown dozens of times with her parents, but this solo journey felt different. She was no longer under the protective umbrella of her father's status. The line shuffled forward slowly. Ahead of her, a white family of 4 moved through the TSA checkpoint with barely a glance from the officers. The father had forgotten to remove his belt but received only a friendly reminder. When Zara reached the document check, the TSA agent squinted at her driver's license, then at her. "This is you?" he asked, his tone suggesting doubt. "Yes, sir," Zara replied evenly, maintaining eye contact the way her father had taught her. "You look younger in the photo." "I was 15 when it was taken." "I'm 16 now," she explained, keeping her voice polite but firm. The agent looked at her boarding pass. "First class to New York. What's a kid like you doing in first class?" Zara felt heat rising to her cheeks but kept her composure. "I'm attending the Columbia University STEM program." The agent seemed unconvinced but eventually waved her through with a skeptical As Zara began placing her belongings in the plastic bins, a TSA officer approached her. "Ma'am, you've been randomly selected for additional screening." "Random?" "Right." Zara glanced around at the predominantly white travelers passing through metal detectors unhindered. She noticed she wasn't the only one randomly selected. A Middle Eastern man and an elderly black woman were also being directed to the side. "Is there a problem?" asked a voice behind her. Zara turned to see a black woman in her 40s, dressed in a tailored pantsuit. "Just a random screening, ma'am," the officer replied curtly. "Interesting definition of random," the woman muttered, but loudly enough to be heard. She gave Zara a look of understanding before proceeding through the checkpoint herself. The additional screening involved a thorough pat-down and a complete search of Zara's carry-on. The officer removed her carefully folded clothes, rifled through her toiletry bag, and even flipped through the pages of her quantum computing textbooks. "What are these for?" he asked suspiciously. "I'm attending a STEM program at Columbia University," Zara repeated, watching as her neatly packed bag was transformed into a jumbled mess. By the time she was cleared, Zara had to rush to repack her belongings. As she struggled to zip her now disorganized bag, the woman from earlier appeared beside her. "Let me help you with that," she offered, helping Zara rearrange her items. "I'm Professor Amara Jenkins, Sociology at Emory. Heading to a conference in New York." "Zara Washington. Thank you for your help." "Washington? Any relation to Malcolm Washington of Washington Technologies?" Zara hesitated. Sometimes revealing her father's identity made interactions easier, other times, it led to uncomfortable scrutiny or disbelief. "He's my father," she admitted. Professor Jenkins raised an eyebrow but didn't look surprised. "Well, Zara Washington, it seems we're both heading to New York. What gate are you?" "B-22. "I'm B-24. Mind if I walk with you?" As they navigated the busy terminal, Professor Jenkins shared her own experiences traveling as a black woman. "It doesn't matter what credentials you have or what clothes you wear. Some people see only one thing." Zara nodded, thinking of her father's warnings. "My dad says to always stay calm but never shrink." "Your father is a wise man. I've followed his career. Self-made tech genius who never forgot where he came from. His foundation has funded several of my research projects on racial equity in education." They reached Zara's gate, where a crowd had already formed around the boarding area. "This is me," Zara said. "Thank you again for your help, Professor Jenkins. Call me Amara." Maybe we'll see each other on the flight. Good luck with your program at Columbia. As first-class boarding was announced, Zara approached the gate agent, boarding pass displayed on her phone. The agent, a blonde woman in her 50s, looked from the pass to Zara with suspicion. "Is this your boarding pass, sweetie?" she asked, emphasizing "your" in a way that made Zara's spine stiffen. "Yes, it is," Zara confirmed. "First class is for full-fare passengers. Are you sure you're not in economy?" Zara thought back to a shopping trip with her mother years ago. They'd entered an upscale boutique, and the saleswoman had immediately directed them to the sale rack, assuming they couldn't afford the new collection. Her mother had simply smiled, asked to see the manager, and proceeded to purchase 3 full-price designer dresses. "I'm quite sure," Zara replied, channeling her mother's dignified assertiveness. "My boarding pass clearly indicates seat 3A. After another suspicious look, the gate agent reluctantly scanned her pass. It does say 3A. Proceed to the jet bridge." Zara walked onto the plane with her head held high, finding her window seat in the first-class cabin. She stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin and settled in, allowing herself a small sigh of relief. The first hurdle was cleared, but the exhaustion of constantly having to prove she belonged was already wearing on her. A flight attendant approached with a pre-departure beverage tray. "Juice or water?" she offered to the white businessman across the aisle. When she turned to Zara, her smile faltered slightly. "Are you sure you're in the right seat, honey?" Zara felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. "Yes, 3A. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." As other first-class passengers boarded, Zara took out her quantum computing textbook and tried to focus on the chapter about quantum entanglement. She was determined to arrive in New York fully prepared for the Columbia program. The empty seat beside her soon became occupied by a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit. He glanced at her with undisguised annoyance. "Excuse me," he said, his voice clipped. "I believe you may be in the wrong section." Zara took a deep breath. "This is seat 3A. I'm in the correct seat." The man, who would later identify himself as Richard Thompson, senior VP at a financial firm, huffed as he stored his briefcase and settled in beside her. He immediately pressed the call button. A flight attendant, whose name tag read Brenda Miller, approached with a practiced smile. "Yes, sir." Thompson gestured toward Zara with a slight tilt of his head. "There seems to be some confusion with the seating arrangement." Brenda turned to Zara. "May I see your boarding pass, miss?" For the third time in less than an hour, Zara had to prove she belonged. She displayed her boarding pass on her phone, keeping her expression neutral despite the burning frustration building inside her. "Oh," Brenda said, sounding surprised. "Yes, that's correct. Can I get either of you a pre-departure beverage?" "Scotch, neat," Thompson replied without looking at her. "Just water, please," Zara said. As Brenda walked away, Thompson muttered just loudly enough for Zara to hear, "I pay good money for first class to avoid certain elements." Zara pretended not to hear, focusing instead on her book. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, "Your worth isn't determined by their perception. Never let them see they've rattled you." The boarding process continued, and Zara noticed Professor Jenkins walking past toward the economy section. The professor gave her an encouraging smile as she passed. Once the plane was fully boarded, the captain announced a slight delay due to air traffic. Thompson sighed dramatically and continued to shoot irritated glances at Zara, as if the delay were somehow her fault. When the plane finally took off, Zara tried to lose herself in her book, but Thompson's constant fidgeting and sighing made it difficult to concentrate. When the drink service began, Brenda served Thompson first, then almost forgotten Zara until she politely cleared her throat. "Oh, sorry, honey. What would you like?" Brenda asked, her tone noticeably less deferential than it had been with Thompson. "Water, please. And could I have some pretzels?" "We're serving mixed nuts in first class," Thompson interjected. "The pretzels are for Coach." Brenda looked uncomfortable. Actually, we have both available. Well, I'll have the nuts, Thompson insisted, as if making a point. Zara received her water and pretzels, noting how Brenda set Thompson's drink on a pristine cocktail napkin while her water was placed directly on the tray table. 20 minutes into the flight, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The captain turned on the fasten seatbelt sign, and the plane jolted. Thompson's scotch sloshed over the rim of his glass, spilling onto his pants. "Damn it," he exclaimed, jumping slightly in his seat. His elbow knocked into Zara's arm, causing her water to spill across her tray table, soaking the pages of her open textbook. "Look what you've done," Thompson accused, gesturing at his damp pants and then at Zara's wet book. "Flight attendant." Brenda hurried over. "What happened?" "This girl knocked my drink over during the turbulence," Thompson claimed, dabbing at his pants with a napkin. "I didn't," Zara began, but Thompson spoke over her. "And now my pants are ruined. These are $300 slacks." Brenda turned to Zara with a disapproving look. "You need to be more careful, miss." "But I didn't touch his drink," Zara protested. "The turbulence." "Don't argue," Brenda cut her off, handing Thompson more napkins. "Sir, I'm so sorry about this. Let me get you another scotch, on the house." As Brenda hurried away, Zara sat in stunned silence, trying to dry her book with the single napkin she'd been given. The injustice of the situation made her throat tight with unshed tears, but she refused to cry. "Not here. Not now." From the economy section, Zara noticed a black businessman being denied a second cup of coffee while the white woman next to him received hers without question. The parallels weren't lost on her. Thompson continued to make a show of his ruined pants, loudly lamenting his misfortune to anyone within earshot. He pressed the call button 3 more times within the next 30 minutes, each time with a new complaint tangentially related to Zara. She was typing too loudly on her phone, her elbow was too close to the armrest, her reading light was bothering him. By the 4th call, Brenda brought along the lead flight attendant, a tall man with a name tag reading, Kevin Peterson. "Is there a problem here?" Kevin asked, his gaze immediately settling on Zara rather than Thompson. "Yes, there is," Thompson said before Zara could speak. "I've been extremely patient, but this has become intolerable." "What seems to be the issue, sir?" Kevin's tone was deferential. "This young woman has been disruptive the entire flight. I've had my drink spilled, my personal space invaded, and now I believe." Thompson lowered his voice conspiratorially, "I believe some of my personal items may have been moved." Zara's eyes widened. "What? That's not true at all." Kevin turned to her with a stern expression. "Miss, please lower your voice." "But he's lying. I haven't touched any of his things." Kevin and Brenda exchanged looks. Kevin leaned closer to Thompson. "Sir, are you suggesting something is missing?" Thompson patted his pockets theatrically. "My wallet. I had it when I boarded, and now." He looked pointedly at Zara. "This is ridiculous," Zara said, feeling a cold wave of fear wash over her. She knew where this was heading. "I never touched his wallet." Kevin straightened up. "I think we need to involve our air marshal." As Kevin walked toward the front of the plane, Zara's hands trembled. She unlocked her phone with the special pattern her father had taught her, activating the recording function. Then she texted her dad, "Emergency on flight. Falsely accused of theft. They're calling Air Marshal." The text delivered just as a broad-shouldered man in plain clothes approached her seat. Air Marshal Sean Donovan had entered the scene, and the situation was about to escalate beyond anything Zara could have imagined. Air Marshal Sean Donovan stood in the aisle next to Zara's seat, his badge displayed prominently in his hand. His presence immediately attracted attention from nearby passengers, many of whom began discreetly filming with their phones. Beside him, Kevin and Brenda flanked either side like deputies backing up a sheriff. "Miss, I need you to stand up and come with me," Donovan said, his voice carrying a tone of non-negotiable authority. Zara felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she remembered her father's advice: stay calm, speak clearly, know your rights. May I ask why? Thompson interjected before Donovan could answer. Because she stole my wallet during the turbulence. I felt her hand near my jacket. Sir, please let me handle this, Donovan said to Thompson before turning back to Zara. Young lady, a passenger has made a serious accusation. We need to resolve this situation immediately, which means you'll need to deplane for questioning when we land. Deplane? Zara's voice cracked slightly. But I didn't take anything. I never touched his things. Passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. From a few rows back, Professor Amara Jenkins stood up. Excuse me, she called out. I've been observing this situation, and this young woman has not left her seat once during this flight. Donovan barely glanced at Jenkins. Ma'am, please remain seated. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us when a minor is being falsely accused, Jenkins replied firmly, moving into the aisle despite the flight attendant's attempts to block her. More passengers were filming now. Zara noticed a young white woman mouthing, "Are you okay?" from across the aisle. She gave a small shake of her head. I didn't take his wallet, Zara stated clearly, making sure her phone was still recording. I've been reading my book and typing notes on my phone. That's all. Then you won't mind if we search your belongings, Donovan stated rather than asked. Actually, I do mind, Zara said, surprising herself with her steadiness. I'm a minor traveling alone, and you have no probable cause to search my belongings. Donovan's expression hardened. Miss, interfering with a federal officer. Is that man's wallet really missing, or is he just making accusations? Professor Jenkins interrupted, now standing directly behind Donovan. Has anyone actually looked for it? Thompson's face reddened. Of course it's missing. It was in my jacket pocket, and now it's gone. A soft voice spoke up from the row behind Thompson. Excuse me? A middle-aged Asian woman pointed toward the floor. Is that it under your seat, sir? All eyes turned to where she was pointing. Just visible under Thompson's seat was the corner of a black leather wallet. A flight attendant bent down and retrieved it, holding it up. Mr. Thompson, is this your wallet? Kevin asked. Thompson's face cycled through several emotions before settling on indignation. She must have put it there. She took it from my pocket and then hid it under my seat when she realized she was caught. The absurdity of the accusation hung in the air. Zara hadn't left her seat once. That's physically impossible, Professor Jenkins stated flatly. This young woman has remained seated the entire time, as multiple witnesses can attest. Murmurs of agreement came from several passengers. The young white woman who had mouthed to Zara earlier spoke up. I've been watching. She never touched that man's jacket or went near his seat. Instead of acknowledging Zara's innocence, Donovan shifted tactics. Regardless of the wallet situation, we still have a disruptive passenger situation. Multiple complaints have been logged by this flight attendant. He gestured to Brenda. Disruptive? Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. I've been sitting here quietly reading. You raised your voice just now, Kevin pointed out, as if that justified everything. Because I'm being falsely accused of theft. Zara's composure was cracking under the weight of the injustice. Donovan placed a hand on the back of Zara's seat, leaning down. Miss, I'm going to ask you one more time to stand up and come with me to the front of the aircraft. We can continue this discussion there. Zara's phone began ringing in her hand. Her father's name flashed on the screen. That's my dad, she said, looking directly at Donovan. I'd like to answer it. This isn't the time for phone calls, Donovan started, but Zara had already accepted the call. Dad, her voice trembled slightly. They're trying to remove me from the plane. Do you think Zara is being treated fairly in this situation? Comment number 1: if you believe the airline staff and Air Marshal are overreacting based on racial bias. Comment number 2 if you think they're just doing their jobs. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories that expose the injustices people face every day. What would you do if you were in Zara's position? And what happens when her powerful CEO father gets involved? Get ready, because this story is about to take a dramatic turn. Malcolm Washington was in the middle of his emergency board meeting when his phone vibrated with Zara's text. The message sent a cold spike of fear through him, a feeling familiar to any black parent whose child was beyond their immediate protection. "Excuse me," he said, rising from his chair at the head of the conference table. "I need to take this call. It's an emergency." The board members exchanged glances as Malcolm stepped out of the room, already dialing Zara. When she answered and he heard the tremor in her voice, followed by, "They're trying to remove me from the plane," every fiber of his being went into high alert. "Put me on speaker," Malcolm instructed, his voice deadly calm. Years of navigating hostile corporate environments as one of the few black CEOs in tech had taught him that displaying anger would only reinforce stereotypes. Strategic control was his most powerful weapon. Through the speakerphone, Malcolm could hear the commotion on the plane, the air marshal's demands, Thompson's continued accusations, and the murmurs of passengers. "This is Malcolm Washington," he announced, his voice clear and authoritative. "Who am I speaking with?" There was a moment of silence before Air Marshal Donovan responded, skepticism evident in his tone. "This is Air Marshal Sean Donovan." "Who is this again?" "Malcolm Washington, CEO of Washington Technologies and Zara's father. May I ask why you're attempting to remove my 16-year-old daughter from her flight?" "Mr. Washington, your daughter has been accused of theft and is creating a disturbance." "The theft accusation has already been disproven," Malcolm interrupted smoothly. "The wallet was found under the accuser's seat, was it not?" "Well, yes, but..." "And this disturbance, did it involve anything other than my daughter defending herself against false accusations?" Thompson's voice cut in. "Listen here, I don't know who you really are, but this girl has been problematic the entire flight, and..." "I wasn't speaking to you, sir," Malcolm's tone could have frozen lava. "I was addressing the federal officer who is currently intimidating a minor without cause." Malcolm could hear his daughter's breathing steadying as he took control of the situation. He had prepared her for moments like this her entire life, but preparation didn't make the reality any less infuriating. "Air Marshal Donovan," Malcolm continued, "I'd like to speak with the captain immediately." "The captain is flying the aircraft, sir," Donovan replied stiffly. "Then find someone to cover for him for 2 minutes," Malcolm insisted. "Because this situation is about to become much larger than a disagreement in first class." As Malcolm waited, he pulled up his email on his office computer and began typing a message to his legal team with the subject line, "Urgent, Racial Profiling Incident on Atlantic Airways Flight 1382. He had Washington Technologies chief counsel on speed dial, a necessary precaution for a black man of his stature. He could hear hushed discussions on the other end of the line before a new voice came on the speaker. "This is Captain Harris." "Who am I speaking with?" "Captain Harris, this is Malcolm Washington, CEO of Washington Technologies. My daughter Zara is being harassed on your flight based on false accusations that have already been disproven." There was a pause. "Mr. Washington, I apologize for any misunderstanding, but my crew is following standard protocols for a reported disturbance." "Captain Harris," Malcolm cut in, his voice remaining measured but taking on a steely edge, "let me be extraordinarily clear. What's happening is not a misunderstanding. It is textbook racial profiling, and it's happening to my 16-year-old daughter." He continued before the captain could respond. "I have 2 questions for you. First, are you aware that Washington Technologies holds your airline's largest corporate contract, worth approximately $50 million annually?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "And second, are you prepared for the publicity when I reveal that your airline removes black teenagers from flights based on false accusations, even after those accusations are proven untrue?" Malcolm could visualize the captain's mental calculations. Atlantic Airways couldn't afford either the loss of the contract or the PR disaster. Mr. Washington, Captain Harris's tone had shifted to one of forced cordiality. I assure you we take these matters very seriously. There's been a misunderstanding that we'll address immediately. Here's what's going to happen, Malcolm stated, laying out terms rather than suggestions. My daughter will remain in her assigned seat for the duration of the flight. Mr. Thompson, who falsely accused her of theft, will be moved to a different seat. Air Marshal Donovan will apologize to my daughter for his unwarranted intimidation tactics. And will discuss appropriate compensation and disciplinary actions after the flight lands. Mr. Washington, with all due respect. I'm not finished, Malcolm continued smoothly. My legal team is already preparing documentation of this incident. I have connections at every major news outlet in the country. The choice is yours, Captain Harris. Resolve this situation appropriately, or explain to your shareholders why your airline is the face of racial profiling in tomorrow's headlines. The strategic pressure points were perfectly targeted. Airlines couldn't afford bad publicity, especially regarding discrimination. The specter of viral videos showing a black teenager being forcibly removed from a flight would be catastrophic. I understand, Mr. Washington, Captain Harris conceded. I'll speak with my crew immediately. Excellent. Zara will keep me on the line throughout this resolution. Malcolm heard the captain step away, followed by hushed, urgent conversations. He could picture the scene, the hurried consultation, the dawning realization of who they were dealing with, the rapid reassessment of priorities. Throughout all of this, Malcolm maintained his focus on what mattered most, his daughter's safety and dignity. Zara, are you okay? He asked while they waited. I'm okay, Dad, she replied, her voice steadier now. Thank you for. She didn't need to finish. They both understood what it meant that she'd needed to call him, that despite her intelligence, her family's wealth, and her rightful place in that first-class seat, she had still been viewed as suspect, as less than, as not belonging. Malcolm felt the familiar mixture of rage and resignation that accompanied these moments. He had built a tech empire, amassed wealth that put him on the Forbes list, created technology used by millions, and yet his daughter still wasn't safe from the most basic forms of racism. The playing field was never level, it just had different obstacles at different elevations. As Captain Harris returned to the phone, Malcolm closed his eyes briefly and centered himself. This battle was nearly won, but the war had been raging since long before Zara was born, and would continue long after today's incident was resolved. All he could do was fight each battle as it came, and prepare his daughter to do the same. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin transformed like a weather system after a sudden change in pressure. Captain Harris returned from the cockpit, his previous confidence replaced with a strained professionalism. He approached Zara's seat where the phone call with Malcolm was still active on speaker. Ms. Washington, he began, his tone markedly different from the dismissive manner of the flight attendants earlier. On behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to personally apologize for this unfortunate misunderstanding. Zara noticed the immediate reaction from surrounding passengers. Whispers rippled through the cabin, Washington. Like Malcolm Washington. The tech billionaire. That's his daughter. Thompson's demeanor underwent the most dramatic metamorphosis. The man who had been red-faced with indignation moments before now blanched visibly, his eyes widening as the implications sank in. Not only had he falsely accused someone of theft, but that someone was the daughter of one of the most powerful black executives in America. Mr. Thompson, Captain Harris continued, will need to relocate you to another seat for the remainder of the flight. That won't be necessary, Thompson stammered, suddenly conciliatory. I may have been mistaken about the wallet. Perhaps it fell out of my pocket during turbulence. Nevertheless, Captain Harris insisted firmly, we think it's best to separate the parties involved. There's an available seat in row 7. As a flight attendant, not Brenda, but a different one who had appeared from economy, escorted Thompson to his new seat, Air Marshal Donovan approached Zara with visible discomfort. Ms. Washington, he said stiffly, I apologize for the misunderstanding. We take all security concerns seriously, but in this case, it appears the situation was misinterpreted. From the phone, Malcolm's voice remained steady. Air Marshal Donovan, I appreciate your apology to my daughter, but let's be clear, this wasn't a misinterpretation. This was racial profiling, and it happened despite the absence of any evidence. I'll be addressing this with your superiors at the Federal Air Marshal Service. Donovan's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing alarm before he nodded curtly and retreated to the back of the plane. With the immediate confrontation diffused, Zara took her father off speaker. Dad, I think it's resolved now. Thank you. I'm staying on the line until the situation is completely settled, Malcolm insisted. Put me back on speaker if anyone approaches you again. Brenda Miller, who had been notably absent during the resolution, now reappeared with a tray of drinks and snacks, offering them exclusively to Zara. Can I get you anything else, Ms. Washington? Perhaps some warm cookies? Or a hot towel? The same flight attendant who had questioned Zara's presence in first class, who had served her water without a napkin, who had sided with Thompson during every interaction, was now performing an elaborate display of customer service. No, thank you, Zara replied quietly. The victory felt hollow. She hadn't earned this sudden respect, it had been granted only after her father's name and status were revealed. From the economy section, Professor Jenkins caught Zara's eye and gave her a knowing look. The professor understood exactly what Zara was feeling, that the temporary shield of her father's influence didn't change the underlying reality. A young black woman in economy was being denied a blanket while white passengers around her received them without question. The woman met Zara's gaze briefly, a moment of unspoken understanding passing between them. I see it too, Zara wanted to say. I haven't forgotten just because they're suddenly treating me better. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the disturbance in our first-class cabin. We're experiencing a slight delay as we address a situation. We expect to resume normal service shortly. Passengers checked their watches and sighed with annoyance. A few cast accusatory glances at Zara, as if she were the cause of their inconvenience rather than its victim. Professor Jenkins seized the opportunity to move to the now empty seat beside Zara, ignoring Kevin's half-hearted protest about returning to her assigned seat in economy. You handled that remarkably well, Jenkins said quietly. Though you shouldn't have had to. I had help, Zara replied, gesturing to her phone where her father was still on the line. Jenkins nodded knowingly. Privilege shields when it's visible. But it's exhausting that we need shields at all. As they spoke, other passengers in first class began sneaking glances at Zara, some tapping on their phones as they searched for information about Malcolm Washington. One man showed his seatmate a Forbes article with Malcolm's photo on the cover, The Coder King, How Malcolm Washington Built a Tech Empire Against All Odds. Zara could feel the calculation happening behind their eyes, the mental arithmetic of how to treat the daughter of a billionaire CEO who could potentially impact their lives or careers. The same people who had watched in silence as she was accused of theft now seemed eager to establish themselves as allies. A white woman across the aisle leaned over. I just want to say, I thought the way they treated you was terrible from the start. If there's anything I can do to help. Zara thanked her politely, but couldn't help wondering where this support had been 15 minutes earlier, before her father's name entered the conversation. In the galley, a cluster of flight attendants including Brenda and Kevin were engaged in intense whispered conversation, occasionally glancing nervously toward Zara. She could imagine their panic as they realized the potential consequences of their actions. Through it all, Zara felt a complex swirl of emotions, relief that the immediate danger had passed, lingering anxiety from the confrontation, anger at the injustice, and a deep weariness that none of this was new or surprising. She remembered her father's words from that morning, the world may try to shrink you, but you've got galaxies inside you. Privilege had protected her today, but what about tomorrow? What about all the other black passengers who didn't have billionaire fathers to call? The young woman denied a blanket in economy, the businessmen refused a second coffee, their experiences wouldn't end with apologetic captains and deferential flight attendants. As if reading her thoughts, Professor Jenkins said quietly, "You know, the real power isn't in making them treat you better. It's in changing the system so they treat everyone better." Zara nodded, a seed of an idea beginning to form in her mind. This incident didn't have to end with her personal vindication. Perhaps there was a way to leverage her father's influence and her own experience into something more meaningful. She lifted her phone. "Dad? I have an idea I want to discuss when we land." 15 minutes after Malcolm Washington's call, the crisis management team at Atlantic Airways headquarters in Dallas was assembled in the company's glass-walled conference room. Patricia Reynolds, the airline's CEO, stood at the head of the table, her expression grave as she surveyed the hastily gathered executives. "Someone explained to me," she began, her voice dangerously calm, "how we managed to racially profile the daughter of Malcolm Washington on one of our flights." No one rushed to answer. The head of operations, Jacob Mercer, cleared his throat. "We've received preliminary reports from the air traffic control team who've been in contact with the captain. Apparently, there was an accusation of theft in first class." "An accusation that was proven false," interjected Diane Chen, the airline's chief counsel, who was reviewing the situation details on her tablet. "And yet our crew continued to escalate the situation, even after the alleged stolen item was found." Reynolds pinched the bridge of her nose. "Do we have video?" "We don't have access to the plane's security footage yet," said Marcus Taylor, the head of public relations, "but we do have this." He turned his laptop around to show a Twitter post already gathering thousands of retweets. The shaky smartphone video showed Air Marshal Donovan standing over Zara while she remained seated, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. The caption read, "Atlantic Airways trying to remove black teenage girl from flight after white man falsely accuses her of theft. At Malcolm Washington's daughter. Hashtag flying while black hashtag Atlantic Airways racism." "That was posted 3 minutes ago," Marcus said grimly. "It's already been shared over 2,000 times." "Dear God," Reynolds muttered. She turned to her assistant. "Get me the current status of our contract with Washington Technologies. Now." As her assistant hurried from the room, Reynolds addressed the team again. "Options. I need them immediately." Diane Chen spoke first. "From a legal standpoint, we're exposed on multiple fronts. Racial discrimination, harassment of a minor, failure to follow proper protocols after an accusation was disproven. If Washington decides to pursue this, and given his history of advocacy, he likely will, we're looking at a PR nightmare and potentially significant damages. Washington Technologies represents approximately $52 million in annual revenue through our corporate travel contract," reported the CFO, Howard Mills. "They're our largest corporate client. The contract is up for renewal in 4 months. And now the billionaire tech CEO with a reputation for championing diversity has video of our staff racially profiling his teenage daughter," Marcus added. "This couldn't be worse timing." Patricia Reynolds was known for her direct approach to crisis management. "I'm calling Malcolm Washington personally. We need to get ahead of this before it explodes further." With respect, Marcus cautioned, Washington isn't just any executive. He's built his brand partly on addressing systemic racism in corporate America. A standard apology and compensation offer won't suffice. Reynolds nodded. "Which is why I'm not offering a standard apology. Diane, draft a statement acknowledging the incident and emphasizing our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Marcus, prepare a more substantive response. I want concrete action items, not just platitudes about doing better." She turned to the VP of Operations. "I want the crew members involved suspended pending investigation, starting immediately. And I want their service records pulled. Let's see if there's a pattern of behavior here." As the team dispersed to their assignments, Reynolds' assistant returned with a folder. "The Washington Technologies contract details, ma'am." Reynolds opened it and frowned at what she saw. Beyond the monetary value, the contract included specific clauses about diversity and inclusion requirements for service providers. Atlantic Airways had barely met the minimum standards during the last review. In her office, Reynolds dialed Malcolm Washington's number, steeling herself for what would likely be the most consequential business call of her career. When her call went straight to voicemail, she wasn't surprised. Washington would be managing his own crisis response. Across the hall, Marcus Taylor's team was already monitoring the social media firestorm. The video had been picked up by several influential accounts, including black rights activists and celebrities with millions of followers. The hashtag Atlantic Airways racism was trending nationally. It's spreading to mainstream news, one of Marcus's analysts reported. CNN just picked it up. They're trying to reach Washington for comment. Meanwhile, Diane Chen's legal team was reviewing the crew members' personnel files. "We have a problem," she announced, entering Reynolds' office without knocking. The flight attendant, Brenda Miller, has 3 previous passenger complaints alleging discriminatory treatment of minority passengers. All were dismissed after internal review. Reynolds closed her eyes briefly. "And the Air Marshal? Donovan is federal, not our employee, but we've requested his service record from FAMS. What about the passenger who made the false accusation? Richard Thompson, executive at Meridian Financial. And here's where it gets worse, he's filed complaints on 2 previous flights, both times accusing minority passengers of misconduct. Once for suspicious behavior that turned out to be a Muslim passenger praying, and once for alleged theft when a Latino passenger accidentally took his overhead bin space." Reynolds' phone rang, the Atlantic Airways board chairman. She took a deep breath before answering. "Charles, I was just about to call you." As the crisis team worked, the flight continued its journey to New York, now carrying a story that would soon reach millions. The crew members involved were still unaware of the corporate earthquake their actions had triggered, but they would soon learn that their encounter with Zara Washington would have consequences far beyond a single flight. Back on the plane, Captain Harris received a terse message from headquarters: crew change ordered upon landing. Pending investigation of incident in first class. Details to follow. He read the message twice, understanding its implications. In his 20 years with Atlantic Airways, he'd never seen a mid-journey crew change ordered except in cases of medical emergency. This was unprecedented. In Dallas, Patricia Reynolds finally received a response from Malcolm Washington, not a return call, but an email. "Ms. Reynolds, I appreciate your attempt to contact me regarding the incident involving my daughter on Flight 1382. However, I will only discuss this matter with my legal team present. They will contact your office to arrange a meeting. Be advised that I am not interested in financial compensation or standard corporate apologies. I am interested in systemic change. Regards. Malcolm Washington." Reynolds forwarded the email to her crisis team with a single comment: "We need more than damage control. We need transformation." As Flight 1382 entered its final hour toward New York, an unusual announcement came over the intercom. Captain Harris's voice sounded strained as he addressed the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to inform you that there will be a crew change when we land in New York. This is a company decision and will result in a slight delay at the gate. We apologize for any inconvenience." Confused murmurs spread throughout the cabin. Crew changes mid-journey were rare enough to be remarkable, and the timing immediately following the incident with Zara was not lost on the passengers who had witnessed the confrontation. In first class, Brenda Miller's professional smile had been replaced by a tense expression as she mechanically performed her duties. Kevin Peterson was nowhere to be seen, having retreated to the rear galley after receiving a message from the cockpit. The atmosphere among the crew had shifted from authority to anxiety. Meanwhile, a new air marshal had quietly replaced Donovan, who had been instructed to remain in the crew rest area for the remainder of the flight. The new marshal, a Latina woman, had introduced herself discreetly to Zara and Professor Jenkins before taking a seat at the back of first class. As these changes unfolded, Richard Thompson sat in his reassigned seat in row 7, periodically glancing nervously toward Zara. When his seatmate showed him the trending hashtag Atlantic Airways racism on Twitter, along with the video that clearly showed him making his accusation, the blood drained from his face. "You're that guy?" his seatmate asked, edging away slightly. Thompson tried to focus on his laptop, but his hands trembled visibly as he typed. A quick Google search of Malcolm Washington net worth had returned the figure of $2.8 billion, along with numerous articles about Washington's advocacy work and reputation for corporate accountability. Thompson's own company, Meridian Financial, had a partnership with Washington Technologies for their banking software. His career prospects were deteriorating with each passing minute. Halfway down the aisle, Professor Jenkins had used the bathroom break as an opportunity to discreetly speak with several other black passengers who had witnessed the incident. By the time she returned to her seat beside Zara, a plan had begun to form. "Zara," she said quietly, "I think you have an opportunity here, if you're willing to take it." Zara looked up from her book, which she hadn't actually been reading. "What kind of opportunity?" "To turn this individual injustice into something more meaningful. Most incidents like this happen to people without your platform or resources. They suffer in silence or are disbelieved. You have a chance to speak for them." Zara considered this. Throughout the ordeal, she had been acutely aware of her dual identity, both the target of discrimination and the privileged daughter of a billionaire. Her father's intervention had protected her, but she couldn't stop thinking about those who didn't have such protection. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. Professor Jenkins outlined her idea just as the captain announced their initial descent into New York. As the plane began its approach, Zara made her decision. She stood up, drawing immediate attention from nearby passengers and crew. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'd like to say something before we land." Kevin Peterson emerged from the galley, moving quickly toward her. "Miss, I need you to return to your seat. We're beginning our descent." "I am in my seat," Zara replied calmly. "I'm just standing beside it, which is allowed until the seatbelt sign comes on." Kevin hesitated, aware of the smartphones that had immediately appeared, recording the interaction. Zara continued, addressing the first-class cabin but projecting her voice so it carried further. "Many of you witnessed what happened to me today. I was falsely accused of theft, then threatened with removal from this flight even after the accusation was disproven. Passengers in economy were standing now, craning to see and hear. What you may not realize is that this happens to black travelers every day. The only difference in my case is that my father's name provided protection that others don't have." She gestured toward the young black woman in economy who had been denied a blanket. That passenger was refused a blanket that white passengers received without question. She pointed to the black businessman. That gentleman was denied a second cup of coffee while others around him were served. The air in the cabin felt electric as Zara continued, her voice growing stronger. "These might seem like small things, but they're part of a pattern that makes travel exhausting and sometimes dangerous for people of color. We're constantly required to prove we belong in spaces where others are automatically welcomed." Professor Jenkins stood beside her now, a silent show of support. "I don't want apologies or special treatment," Zara declared. "I want systemic change. I want accountability. I want every passenger on every flight to be treated with equal dignity, regardless of their race or whether they have a famous parent." From the back of the plane, someone began to applaud. The sound spread, growing into sustained applause that rippled through the cabin. Several passengers were openly recording now, and Zara knew her words would likely reach far beyond this flight. As the applause died down, an older white man in first class raised his hand. When Zara nodded to him, he spoke up. "Miss Washington, I'm Lawrence Green, on the board of Atlantic Airways. I want you to know that what happened today is inexcusable, and I personally commit to addressing it at our next board meeting." Thompson, who had returned to retrieve his forgotten briefcase, froze in the aisle, suddenly aware that his actions had caught the attention of an airline board member. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and Zara returned to her seat. As she buckled in, Professor Jenkins handed her a business card. I run diversity training programs for major corporations, she explained. Including airlines. If you and your father are serious about creating change, I'd like to help. Zara took the card, an idea crystallizing. What if Atlantic Airways donated to STEM programs for minority students instead of trying to buy my silence with vouchers and upgrades? Jenkins smiled. Now you're thinking like someone who understands the true value of influence. As the plane touched down at JFK, the new Air Marshal approached Zara. Ms. Washington, I've been instructed to escort you to the gate. Your father is waiting there. Is he alone? Zara asked, suspecting the answer. No, the Marshal admitted. There appear to be several news crews as well. The aircraft taxied to the gate, where an Atlantic Airways executive team was waiting on the jet bridge. As the door opened, Captain Harris made one final announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to personally apologize for the incident that occurred on our flight today. This does not reflect our values as an airline, and we are taking immediate steps to address it. All passengers will find a voucher in their email, and we're making a donation to the National STEM Diversity Initiative in recognition of Ms. Washington's upcoming program at Columbia University. Zara exchanged a surprised look with Professor Jenkins. The airline was already implementing her suggestion. As she gathered her belongings, Brenda Miller approached her with an apologetic expression. Ms. Washington, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. I have no excuse. Zara studied the flight attendant's face, seeing genuine remorse. Thank you for saying that. But I hope you realize I'm not the only one who deserves that apology. As she walked off the plane, Zara felt a complex mixture of emotions, exhaustion from the ordeal, pride in having spoken up, hope that perhaps something meaningful might come from this terrible experience. But beneath it all was the sobering knowledge that for every incident like hers that received attention and accountability, countless others went unaddressed. She stepped into the terminal, where her father waited with open arms, ready to face whatever came next. 3 months after the incident on Flight 1382, Zara Washington stood at a podium in the Grand Ballroom of the Marriott Marquis in Times Square. Before her sat 300 young black women, all participants in the inaugural Washington Foundation Conference for Women of Color in STEM. When I boarded that flight to New York for my summer program, I never imagined it would lead to this, Zara began, her confidence having grown remarkably since that day. But sometimes the worst moments can catalyze the most important changes. In the front row, Malcolm Washington watched his daughter with unmistakable pride. Beside him sat Professor Amara Jenkins, now the Director of Diversity Initiatives at the newly established Washington Justice Institute, and Patricia Reynolds, the CEO of Atlantic Airways, whose presence signified the airline's commitment to the changes they had promised. The 3 months since the incident had been transformative. The video of Zara's confrontation with Air Marshal Donovan had indeed gone viral, amassing over 30 million views across platforms. Major news outlets had covered the story, sparking a national conversation about racial profiling in the travel industry. Rather than pursuing a traditional lawsuit, Malcolm and Zara had chosen a different path. They had used their leverage to negotiate systemic changes within Atlantic Airways. Today, I'm proud to announce that Atlantic Airways has completed its first company-wide anti-bias training program, Zara continued, gesturing toward Patricia Reynolds. Every employee, from baggage handlers to pilots, has participated in the curriculum developed by Professor Jenkins. The audience applauded as Reynolds nodded acknowledgement. Additionally, the airline has implemented new reporting procedures for discrimination incidents, with oversight from an independent review board that includes civil rights attorneys and community advocates. What Zara didn't mention was the behind-the-scenes struggle that had led to these changes. Initially, Atlantic Airways had offered the standard corporate response, a large settlement, first-class upgrades for life, and vague promises to do better. Malcolm had rejected these offers outright, demanding structural reforms instead of personal compensation. The Washington Justice Institute had been formed specifically to address cases like Zara's, incidents of discrimination that could leverage the power of public attention into meaningful change. With Professor Jenkins at the helm, the institute provided both legal support and educational resources for victims of racial discrimination. As for the individuals directly involved in the incident, Air Marshal Sean Donovan had been reassigned to a desk position pending completion of additional training. His service record had revealed 2 previous complaints of excessive force used against minority passengers. Flight attendant Brenda Miller had been initially suspended, then offered the choice between termination or participating in Atlantic's new peer education program. She had chosen the latter and was now working with Professor Jenkins to share her experience as a cautionary tale in training sessions. Richard Thompson had faced his own consequences. After the video identified him clearly, several former colleagues had come forward with accounts of discriminatory behavior at Meridian Financial. The company, eager to distance itself from the controversy, had placed him on administrative leave. His partnership with Washington Technologies had been quietly terminated. But this isn't just about one airline or one incident, Zara continued in her speech. This is about creating spaces where we all belong, where no one has to prove their right to exist in first class, in boardrooms, or in STEM fields. She looked out at the young women in the audience, brilliant minds with dreams as vast as her own, many of whom had faced barriers far more challenging than anything Zara had encountered. My father often tells me that privilege isn't just something to be grateful for, it's a responsibility. Those of us with platforms, resources, or visibility have an obligation to use them to create pathways for others. In the 3 months since the incident, Zara had completed her summer program at Columbia with distinction. Her experience had shaped her project focus. She had developed an algorithm for identifying patterns of bias in customer service interactions, which was now being piloted by several major corporations, including Atlantic Airways. The Washington Foundation has established a scholarship fund to support Black women pursuing degrees in STEM fields, Zara announced. And I'm honored to share that Atlantic Airways has committed $1 million to this initiative as part of their broader diversity and inclusion overhaul. The applause was thunderous. After the speech, as attendees mingled during the reception, Malcolm approached his daughter. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just stand up for yourself, you created something that will help countless others." Zara hugged her father tightly. "I had a good teacher." "Two good teachers," she amended, thinking of her mother's unwavering dignity in the face of discrimination. Patricia Reynolds joined them, champagne flute in hand. "Ms. Washington, that was an inspiring speech. Your foundation's work is making a real difference. As is your company's commitment to change," Malcolm acknowledged. "Though we both know it shouldn't have taken a viral video to make it happen." Reynolds nodded soberly. "True transformation is painful and expensive. But the cost of not changing is ultimately higher." Across the room, Professor Jenkins was speaking with a young woman who looked remarkably like Zara. Upon closer inspection, Zara recognized her, the passenger from economy who had been denied a blanket on that fateful flight. "Destiny here has just been accepted to MIT's aerospace engineering program," Jenkins announced as Zara approached. "She's one of our first scholarship recipients." Destiny smiled shyly. "Your foundation's financial support made it possible. My single mom couldn't have afforded it otherwise." "That flight was terrible," Zara said, "but meeting you and creating this connection makes it almost worth it." "Almost," Destiny agreed with a knowing look. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Zara found herself alone for a moment, looking out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. The city that had welcomed her with such hostility 3 months ago now felt like the launching pad for something important. Her phone buzzed with a news alert: Atlantic Airways announces new Chief Diversity Officer as part of industry-leading inclusion initiative. The change was real and measurable. Yet Zara knew that for every visible victory, countless everyday battles continued to be fought by those without her resources or platform. Her responsibility was to keep using her voice, her privilege, and her growing influence to create spaces where others could thrive. As she prepared to return to the ballroom, Zara thought about her upcoming flight home to Atlanta. She would be in first class again, but this time with a different kind of confidence, Not just the knowledge that she belonged there, but the certainty that she was helping to create a world where everyone belonged, regardless of the color of their skin or the wealth of their parents. The true resolution wasn't just justice for one black teenager on one flight. It was the beginning of justice taking flight in ways that would uplift many others for years to come. Zara's experience teaches us that racial discrimination persists at every socioeconomic level. Even with wealth and privilege, black individuals face prejudice that others never encounter. The story demonstrates how power dynamics shift when status is revealed, highlighting the superficial nature of respect based solely on recognition rather than human dignity. Most importantly, this narrative shows that true justice isn't just about individual vindication but systemic change. By refusing standard settlements and demanding institutional reforms, the Washingtons created lasting impact beyond their personal experience. The story also emphasizes the responsibility that comes with privilege. When Zara used her platform to advocate for others without her advantages, she transformed an individual injustice into collective progress. Finally, we learn that accountability doesn't always mean punishment. Through education and reformed policies, Atlantic Airways turned a crisis into an opportunity for genuine transformation, proving that organizations can evolve when properly motivated. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? What did you do? Share your story in the comments below. If this account resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that highlight social justice issues. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Together, we can create awareness that leads to real change. Thank you for watching, and remember, when we stand up against injustice, we stand up for everyone's right to dignity and respect.